3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast.
From Philadelphia to Los Angeles
And everywhere in between.
filmed at the Nittany No Huddle studio.
It's Jordo, Zach, and Coach Devin covering all things Penn State football all the time.
This is from 45 and it's blocked. Lions scoop it up. Brad Haley will score.
And here we go.
All right, welcome back, Nittany No Huddle Nation. Today's video, we're going to be covering the truth about Penn State football. So we could probably talk for about 3 hours, as Zach said about that. We're just going to recap the Michigan game a little bit, and that's what we're going to be covering today. So we'll get right into it. Let's talk about Michigan game after letting it settle for a little bit. What do you guys think moving forward? You know, what is our ceiling? Do we still have a shot at the Big Ten? What's kind of our thought process? I'll turn it over to Zach first. I know you got some good stuff. We'll start off with you. What do you think Penn State's ceiling is this year with the games left?
So I think I'm with the benefit of hindsight, I'm not going to really change too much from what we talked about immediately after the game. I still think 10-2 is probably the ceiling. I don't know that it's likely, but I think just looking at the schedule, looking at the flaws of a couple of the teams, I think when we were talking after the Michigan game, we didn't know about Tagovailoa's injury for Maryland. I think that's a big injury, and maybe changes what you think of when Maryland comes to town.
And maybe you want to just say what the injury is, because I actually didn't know that he got hurt. So
I just know it was a pretty serious leg injury. I actually haven't seen any updates. I don't know if they've announced anything, but it looked fairly serious. I don't know, Devin, if you happen to see any like reports or anything.
I haven't seen any reports either, but same as like you said, it looked bad.
Yeah, he went out of the Indiana game with a pretty serious looking leg injury, and just it looked like one where he's going to be out for a while. We'll put it that way. But so if that's the case, I think that maybe changes Maryland a little bit. We did see Sparty kind of finally put their foot in the ground and actually stand up and get a nice overtime win over Wisconsin. But again, I think you're talking about ceiling. You look at the schedule and you say, okay, I would love to beat Ohio State. Probably not going to happen. But I think everyone would feel a little bit of disappointment with a loss to any of the remaining teams on the schedule. That said, there's a couple teams on the schedule that I think could beat Penn State. So, you know, somewhere between 10-2 is best case scenario. Maybe 9-3 is most likely. 8-4 starts to get into not quite as bad as last year, but a little bit of that same, like, man, we really built ourselves up early on for what we felt was like, what we felt like was going to be a good season. And it just kind of snowballed at the end. I think 8-4 will leave a pretty sour taste in everybody's mouth.
yeah, I would agree, even though that's what I kind of projected at the beginning of the season. But speaking of quarterbacks being injured, I saw that Tanner Morgan for Minnesota this upcoming week might be out as well. So that's something to keep tabs on. That could easily change, you know, the outlook of this next game. And then also you mentioned Maryland as well with injuries. I will say, knock on wood, we've been very lucky to not have a lot of bad injuries so far, especially compared to last year, if you look at it. So I think that plays a big part, just being healthy. You can have all the talent in the world, but they got to be healthy to play. So Devin, what's your thoughts on Penn State's ceiling moving forward?
Yeah, I stand by pretty much everything I said on Saturday, that I think talent-wise, we're a 10-2 team. I think we're the third best team in the Big Ten East. I'm surprised at how wide that gap is. I think that's what's most disappointing to me, is that I did not expect gap from Ohio State, Michigan to Penn State to be that far. But it also would not surprise me if we beat Ohio State in 2 weeks. Like, I mean, it really wouldn't.
College football.
Because we've always played so well against Ohio State. Of all the
Actually
teams
at home.
Yeah, and of all the teams that Franklin has coached against, for whatever reason, the guys come ready to play for Ohio State. And it's I mean, other than that one game in the shoe, I can't think of a time under Franklin where we've literally played as bad as we did on Saturday against Michigan. We're going to go 9-3. I firmly stand by that, because we're going to choke somewhere. I don't think it's this weekend. It could be Maryland. It could be Sparty. Could be somebody else. But I think closing that gap between Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State, that's what is really crucial for the next several years or 10 years for that matter.
Well, we got time.
Yeah.
If nothing else, we got time. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like I said, it's so funny how I know it's like cliche to say, but move the goalpost. I am so guilty of that. I started off the season 8-4. We're going 8-4. We're gonna win the first, 5-6 games. Then we're gonna lose to Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio State, and that looks very plausible. But somehow I'm disappointed with that now. So it's like, I think I blame Auburn for being trash. Really, honestly.
I blame
because-
Auburn. That should be in the thumbnail video.
I should clip that. Like, I blame Auburn. I mean, I do, because like, you go on the road to an SEC team and you beat the brakes off them like that. Like,
Yeah.
we beat them by the same amount that Georgia beat them. So like, in my mind, I'm like, are we
Right.
equal to Georgia? No, we're not. But it gave me hope. It's like that Avengers meme, like, don't give me hope. That's what they did to me. And now I'm, the highs are so high, but the lows, they're so low. So I will say, I mean, our last video obviously blew up, and we've had a ungodly amount of comments in there, and going through them all, I've seen a lot of people like, oh, you didn't really talk about how like we have like 10-2 talent, but we only win like 7-8 games with that talent. And I'm like, I think we kind of have all said that. So, but that's all I got for the ceiling. I agree. I mean, could we possibly go 11-1? Maybe. I just think it's unlikely. We were exposed. People have the blueprint now. Hey, we are not the number 3 rushing defense that people thought we were. And Zach covered that. To be fair, in our pregame,
Yeah.
you were spot on. You were ahead of Joe Klatt on that. I don't know if you watched.
Good friend of the podcast.
Yeah, good friend of the podcast, dear friend Joe Klatt. He he covered it today. He was saying how Michigan just ran all over us with the alleged number 3 rushing defense, but clearly it was a little miscued. So we'll move on. I guess the big question moving forward is, should we as Penn State fans and college football fans in general be upset with 9-win seasons? I think that's like, I typically among Penn State fans and friends, we always talk about Nebraska. They fire their historic 9-win coach and then just immediately tank. What does that look like for us? I know we're kind of in a contract issue with Franklin, which I don't think we can get out of anytime soon. Like, I know, Zach, maybe you mentioned it, that like the earliest that it would be plausible is maybe 3 years from now, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, I guess. You have to talk to the boosters, I guess. But I feel like when you typically see the buyouts, so like Wisconsin just bought out Paul Chryst, and allegedly he was due 20 million, and somehow they settled and he got 11 or something. But I don't recall ever seeing. I think Scott Frost, for example, I think he got like bought out for like 30 million or something. I know it was weird because if Nebraska would have just waited a couple weeks, it would have
been like
half.
15 or something.
So that tells you that there are people out there with deep enough pockets that they really want to, if they really want to see coaches get fired, they will
Terry
pay for it.
Pagula.
So, I mean, the thing with Penn State is that it's either 80 or 72 at the moment, and it drops either 8 or 9 million per year. So I really think just based on what you see other schools do, you're probably talking like 4 or 5 years before it becomes palatable for someone to actually want to cut a check to do that. So, I mean,
Yeah,
again,
yes,
I guess it's possible somebody's out there that would cut a check if
Right.
things, if we lost every game the rest of the season.
And if
maybe,
you're
I don't know,
Franklin,
but-
why would you ever, like, you're never going to resign that. You're
yeah,
not.
there's
And I don't blame him. I would never either.
no, I mean, why would you? And
You'll
also,
need a SWAT team to get me out of that office. Like,
yeah. And also, like we talked about after the game, like the school doesn't think there's a problem. The school doesn't care really about the on-field results because the stadium will be filled every year. The whiteout will be nuts. we'll be on TV. We're on guaranteed TV with the Big Ten contracts. It almost doesn't matter. The on-field results no longer matter. And it kind of stinks, but I think we all as fans have to recognize that the way we view the product is different than the way that the suits and the execs view the product, which is unfortunate, but a reality, right? I mean, that's why Rutgers is in the Big Ten. If it was the other way around, Rutgers would not be in the Big Ten, but they are. So
yeah. So I guess like from your perspective, should we be happy with 9 wins, or do you think we're setting the bar too high? I guess, like realistically, like
so
the way the Big Ten is right now, because I do think with the change in the playoff and the change in the Big Ten and possibly moving to pods, I think we're going to see Penn State might see more success, and we might find ourselves in the playoffs consistently year after year, even with 9-10 wins.
So I think to answer the first part of that question, I think you largely should be happy with 9 wins. I think we've seen basically every program in the country in the last 2 decades has either had a small blip on the radar where they fell out of the elite category, or a large blip on the radar where they completely fell out and never came back. So I think basically every program, and I've always wondered when Saban retires, are we going to see that with Bama? But Miami, Nebraska, look at Colorado. I mean, Colorado won a national title in the 90s. Michigan had a really bad downturn. Penn State, even Ohio State, with between the scandal and bringing Urban Meyer in, had a couple off years. So everyone is nobody's immune to it. At the same time, I think there are categories of schools where the fan base is justified in saying we expect to play and compete for conference titles at a minimum, right? And I'm not one of these Penn State elitists that thinks we're like a top 5 blue blood, but I think we are in that category where the expectation should be we are not getting our teeth kicked in by Ohio State and Michigan every year. We're either like in that category, but at the back end of it, or we're in the next tier down, just trying to kick our way in, right? Right. For me, that's the win-loss stuff is. I think Franklin is able to recruit well enough that if he's not winning 9 games every year, there's a problem because there are 9 games on the schedule every year that you pretty much, if you don't win, it's like, oh man, like this game coming up, Minnesota, they're not a bad team, but there's going to be a sour taste in everyone's mouth if you can't beat Minnesota at home in the whiteout. So that's why for me, just to kind of, I'm rambling a little bit, but to wrap it up, I feel like once you start getting to the point where we're non-competitive with Ohio State and Michigan, and I hate to be the guy that says the whole season comes down to 2 games, but if the program's not competitive with those 2 schools, then we're going in the wrong direction, because that's if you set the bar or the standard based on what I just described, which I think most Penn State fans do. Some of them are maybe a little too irrational and say we should be winning national titles. Mine is just we should be competing almost year in and year out, competing for that top end of the Big Ten, right? Where we seemingly belong on the field with Ohio State and Michigan. And I worry that college football is a cyclical business. The recruits they watch the games, right? They see, and it can turn quick. We talked last Saturday about how Michigan was kind of in where we're a weird spot like we're in right now. And they turned it around, and maybe Penn State will turn it around too. But if you don't turn it around, it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you kind of can't get out of it. And that's my biggest fear. I don't think Franklin's going to be like a 4-8 coach or something. I just think we're going to get caught in this rut that you can never get out of.
Yeah. And I think too, with what you said, is the biggest takeaway is competing for Big Ten titles, which sucks for us because we're on the East. And most years we are probably the 2nd or 3rd best team in the Big Ten, but we're on the wrong side of the conference. So it's just tough.
So what?
I know. I'm just saying.
Did Penn State join the Big Ten in 1993 to play Illinois and Purdue?
No,
they joined it to play Michigan and Ohio State, and they thought we were on the same brand as those programs.
They joined it for money, but yeah, I agree. No, but I'm just saying, like, to be competitive, like we have been historically competitive with at least Ohio State or Michigan, maybe not both in the same year, but one or the two, and we still haven't had the chance to play for the Big Ten. That's all I'm saying. where you
No,
get
I agree, and I think the competitive balance aspect of the Big Ten is probably going to get itself worked out here in a few years once UCLA and USC join, and we'll see how they schedule. I think we'll still probably end up playing Ohio State every year, and probably see a good bit of USC and UCLA just based on you have to imagine those schools coming in want to see the powers, but would it be nice to say would it be nice to be in the ACC Coastal Division and play Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, Pitt, Miami, and Duke every year and win that division? I guess. I mean, to me, it would feel really hollow. And imagine the years where you don't have Clemson on the schedule. You'd look at the schedule before the season and be like, "Am I even excited?" Like,
yeah.
what?
I
I
agree
like that I like that we have those two games every year, no matter what, home and away every other year. You pencil those games and say if something's happening this year, those two one of those two games has to be taken as a W.
Yeah. I guess the bigger thing I'm thinking of is like comparing us to the SEC, which I think is our most comparable conference. I know SEC fans might, if you're watching this, we probably don't have any SEC fans, but if you're watching this, you may take offense to it. But if you look at Georgia, would Georgia be the program they are right now if they played in the SEC West? I don't think so. Like being able to dominate your side of the conference, and yeah, the SEC is very deep and there are good teams on both the East and West, but you're not playing Bama every year, or if you are, you're playing them for, the conference title. And if you're already undefeated at that point, like last year, the conference title was totally irrelevant. So I think it's just kind of the disparity with the Big Ten in general, where we're very loaded on the East and the West is just kind of there, But Devin, what do you think? You've been kind of quiet, so.
Well, yeah, I don't want to interrupt or anything. So I think we have to take a step back, and I think that James Franklin deserves a lot of credit for what he has done at Penn State until the last handful of years. To come in post sanctions, post the Bill O'Brien era, and still had a lot of scholarship reductions those first 2 years, and did more with that. He accomplished more than I think some of us really thought he would in those first 2 years, to go to 2 bowl games, to be over 500, and then to turn around in 2016 and 17 and be one of the best teams in the nation, a top 10 team. He deserves credit for that.
Yeah, I agree.
The question, though, that you're asking is, should we be satisfied with 9 wins? And I don't know if I believe that we can consistently win 9 games with James Franklin, as much as that sucks to say. So
I mean, statistically, you're right.
Yeah, we either win 11 games or we win 7 games. I mean, and 7 wins at Penn State is not enough, I don't think. If we win 9 games every year, we lose to Michigan and or Ohio State, and we drop somebody else. Or, I mean, 10 obviously is what we want. If we won 10 games every year, sign Franklin until he dies. It's fine. I think I would be okay with that. We go to a bowl game every year. We probably win every other year.
And you have the hope where maybe
one year you get 12.
An outlier.
Correct. One year you get 2016, 2017, where we're fighting for a college football playoff. I just don't know. Yeah. And I just don't know if Franklin is that guy. I've never thought Franklin was that guy, but I've been trying to give him more credit. I don't know.
I really think too, and I mean, this is obviously going into our next point with James Franklin, is I just want some accountability. Like, I thought he was doing everything right this year, and yeah, I don't think anything he could have done differently this year would have prevented what we saw this weekend. But when you come out and say, oh, we need to recruit bigger guys on our line, like, my brother in Christ, you're the one who recruited them. Like, I know we joke about it, but it's serious. Like, the line stops with you. Like, you recruited them. So you've been there for 8 years. There's no really excuse to, throw those guys under the bus. And I feel bad for both our offensive and defensive line. I can't imagine being a college student and hearing your coach go out there after you just got, destroyed on the field, put your body on the line on the field, and then you come back and see this press conference where he's like, "We need to recruit bigger guys." Like, I'd be like, "Here's my jersey." Like, I'm done. I don't know. What did you guys think of that? It just left a very sour taste in my mouth, and I know a lot of our Penn State fans were very passionate, and there's kind of a line in the sand with Franklin supporters and Franklin non-supporters. And I feel like this is just kind of digging that line a little bit deeper. Like, it just was comments that I felt like were unnecessary. Like, we all saw there was a difference, but you don't go on national TV and use that as a like excuse to lose 41-17. So
Yeah,
Zach, go ahead.
I mean, I saw the quote, and he specifically he even went off on a tangent with saying like everybody thinks they're Aaron Donald and they can play undersized at D tackle. So like he was specifically calling out the D tackles, and I'm
The
like,
D tackles didn't even play that bad personally. Like,
well, he spent the last 8 years recruiting defensive linemen that look like basketball players. That is his strategy. That is his stated position is we're going to be fast and athletic and long and lean and rangy. And we go after it. We recruit these guys that are going to need 3 or 4 years in the weight room before they're a Big Ten player, but they look great.
He's always recruited speed over
he recruits
over
specimens
size.
and you see what you see the difference when you play a Jim Harbaugh team that he recruits football players. And again, I think what Franklin has always done is he has tried to recruit in a way, he's tried to build a program that can compete with Ohio State. I will give him credit that I think that that's always been what he's trying to do. And you have to play with speed to do that. But
look at all
they
Ohio
recruit at
State's
a whole nother
offensive
level
line.
though.
Like I get that, but Ohio State's offensive line is always huge and always
They have an elite offensive line, and
Yeah,
we
so-
didn't even get into the offensive line play yet. But I specifically mean like defense, like sort of defensive line, front seven, receivers, and secondary. There's a certain, you just see it. Like there's a certain, I'll say this, receivers for whatever reason for the last like 6 years, all we sign is guys that are like 5'10",
I
and
think
they
also-
better be speed guys at that.
Yeah.
If you're not going to have a single big receiver on the roster, they better be fast. And I talked about this on Saturday, and I don't want to throw the receivers under the bus because I think the O-line stunk. I think the quarterback play was not great. I think the running backs leave a lot to be desired, although they're true freshmen. But like and I don't want to belabor my point from Saturday, but we don't have any receivers that scare anybody. So what's the point of all of these highly rated 4-star athletes that we're recruiting that are supposed to be, burners and impossible to cover in space, and they don't get open? I mean, you don't see Parker Washington and Keandre Lambert-Smith and Tinsley getting open the way that Ronnie Bell and even Roman Wilson were getting open. And there's a lot, and that's part of why I get so frustrated with the hatred of the quarterback when they show the all 22 clip, at the game, and you see Michigan blitzes and brings a double A gap blitz, and Clifford just floats the ball to nowhere. But you see the receivers all running down the field, and either they're not getting open, or there's not communication on like hot route if there's a blitz. Like somebody needs to be busting a route off whenever they're blitzing more guys than we can block. And so now I'm kind of getting off on a tangent a little bit, but like there's just problems everywhere. And
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, and I think part of the problem is when you said we're not on the same level as Ohio State and Michigan, that goes into recruiting too. I know people are like, oh, well, like stat wise, we are recruiting the same as Michigan. But if you look at the players, we're really not. Like honestly, like physicality, yeah, we may have checking the box, like, yes, we have the same amount of 4-stars as them. But what do their 4-stars look like compared to ours? I feel like we kind of get, I don't want to say sloppy seconds, but that's kind of what it feels like compared to Ohio State, Michigan. It's like, these are the guys that Ohio State, Michigan don't want, so they're going to come to Penn State. That's what it feels like.
I think you nailed it. And I used to follow recruiting pretty closely, and I've kind of just don't have time anymore. But there used to be so many guys where there'd be 4-stars, and we'd get them, and you'd see like they didn't have a Ohio State or Michigan offer. And anytime there was one of those kids like really highly rated that did the whole like, sit at the table and pull out all the different hats, and it was like a key priority for Ohio State or Michigan, like we never got that guy.
Yeah.
And so I think part
We
of it
didn't even have a
you're
hat
right
on the
that
table usually.
Yeah. But part of it is just, I think either we're not getting the priority guys that they're getting is one part of it. And the other part of it, I think is like, is knowing who you are in recruiting. And like a great example with Harbaugh.
Identity.
I think Harbaugh decided like, we're not going to out Ohio State. So let's be the best version of us that we can be. And let's bring in guys that can play our system, that are football players, that are tough,
And
smart,
coordinators.
and let's be us. Like, let's not chase Ohio State. Let's be the best version of us that we can be. And I feel like Franklin is kind of caught in this loop where he wants the program to be about speed and athleticism and long rangy defensive players, but then you look out there and I just, especially like at linebacker right now, I mean, Abdul Carter's been great for a true freshman. Jacobs has been pretty solid, but I mean, I think Abdul Carter is our second best linebacker. I think we have two Big Ten linebackers right now. And forget linebacker you for a second. If we're recruiting at the level we're allegedly recruiting at, how does that happen?
Yeah.
Like maybe you have a bad year, you miss a year, you don't get a linebacker or something, but like how does that happen? Or your defensive line, everybody's undersized and you're going to throw them under the bus after the Michigan game. How does that happen with all of the alleged talent that's in the room?
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to the point I meant to bring this up in the Michigan like pregame like that we did. Michigan's offensive line, they have two grad transfers, so 5th-year seniors. Actually, they might even be 6 years, to be honest. I didn't look at the details because of the COVID year or whatever. But the two grad students, and then they have 2 redshirt juniors and 1 junior starting. Then compare that to our defensive line. Like, we have a huge gap in experience and then also in size as well. And I think it just kind of compounded into that. But it goes right into your point, like, how do we end up that way? Like, Franklin's preaching like next guy up all the time, but like we're not even recruiting next guy up. So, but Devin, what's your thoughts on like the recruiting disparity that we have right now as well?
I think that you kind of hit it the best is that, and Zach followed it up, is when you look at the rankings, we're getting the same amount of 4 stars as other people, but we're getting the 4 stars that didn't want to go to Michigan and Ohio State. I think of the kid from Warwick, the offensive lineman that's 6'8", 350 or whatever he is. Like, where did he want to go play? He went to go play at Wisconsin because they are just a ground and pound team, and he's going to be a prototypical NFL offensive lineman. That's not what Penn State does on offense.
And that's a guy in the backyard.
Yeah, Warwick in Lancaster. I mean, and he goes to Wisconsin because we are this undefined type of offense that's kind of spread, kind of read option, kind of run when we want to. We don't really know. Yeah, like RPO, like, but what are we? And then to Zach's point about defense, I'm all for long, rangy safeties, cornerbacks. I love it. I think we have really solid athletes in our secondary. Defensive linemen need to be men, like grown men who are going to get to the quarterback. And it doesn't have to be a speed thing. That is a size and strength thing. And anytime there's somebody around that has those skills, they don't go to Penn State. They leave the state. We definitely don't dominate the state, and they're out of here. Even to bring up Minnesota, I know we'll get in heavy on those previews. I mean, you got Anthony Smith from Shippensburg. Do I think he's an NFL player? No. I hope he is because he dunked on us 30 times, but he's still 6'7", 300 pounds, D end. Where does he want to go? Not Penn State. Why? Because he's not speed guy, and that's what they want at the end. And it just, when you play Michigan, when you play Zach's favorite team, Illinois, when you play Minnesota this weekend, that's just going to load the offensive line and say, I dare you to stop us to run. I dare you to prevent us from getting 4 yards on first down. The guys we have aren't going to do that. I think Mustapher is really good. I do. I really do.
I agree.
but beyond him, I haven't. And Chop Robinson is coming into his own, but he is a speed end. So
He's
I
a
don't.
pass rusher. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, like he's not a run defensive guy. He's a guy that you bring in, or the NFL has so many packages for third down pass rushers. Like he would be perfect for that if we had anybody else that could play.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it doesn't matter if you can just double team him because the rest of your team can't get past him.
yeah,
So the thing too with, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. When you don't have physical guys, it doesn't matter how fast you are because you're not getting by those big linemen.
Yeah.
Like you can be slow if you can put the offensive lineman on his ass every play. And that's the reality. And I think that's been our problem, both on offense and defensive side, is we've been undersized for years. We've, even before we started this podcast, we've had a group chat for, I don't know, what, the last 8 years. And it's the same thing every year where we talk about our offensive line problems. And we've had, what, 5 different offensive coordinators and nothing has changed. So I don't even think, and maybe that's just, I don't know who's in charge of hiring staff. Franklin probably, but maybe that's
would
he
hope.
doesn't. What'd you say?
you would hope. I mean, like, yeah, it's kind of.
Sorry, I thought you said
kind of
Joe
a joke.
Paul for a second.
Oh, no.
Like, what?
You would hope that Franklin is the sole person making those hiring decisions.
Because that may be.
I
the
don't know,
problem,
though.
Too, is he wants somebody who fits his offensive ideas.
Yeah.
But clearly that's not what's working out. And I know we hit on it a little bit last week or previous episode about Harbaugh making that change and going away from, hey, we're only going to be a run first offense all the time, and kind of giving his coordinators a little bit more, of the playbook and letting them kind of dictate things. And he's had great success. I have it written down somewhere. Michigan is, I think, 19-2 in the last, or 17-2 in their last 19 games. And that all came when Harbaugh took his pay cut. So I don't know. There's something to be said for that, for sure. But we'll move on. I mean, I feel like we had talked in circles around the horn for, another 40 minutes, but we'll move on. I guess the next thing to cover would be, let me pull this up. We kind of hit on, our thoughts on being 9 wins. I guess really is, there's no point in really over talking it because we can't get out of the contract essentially unless somebody wants to front $70 million. But I don't really see that happening. The school board would have to be on board with that. And honestly, I just don't think there's enough pressure for that to happen. So we kind of hit Michigan a little bit, but we can go into what we saw. Like, could we see Michigan, potentially playing for a national title? They looked really good against us, but as a lot of our commenters have said, they still haven't played a real opponent yet. So I know we made that joke, but it kind of feels that way. So just outlook on the Big Ten. What do we think is going to happen moving forward? I'll turn it over to either one of you. Devin, if you want to go first this time, you can.
So I think Michigan has the talent level and the team makeup to compete for a Big Ten title and to beat Ohio State and to go to the college football playoffs. I think the team that they have built is fully capable of that. I'm still not sure about JJ McCarthy. If he, at the end of the day, at some point this season, he's going to have to win them a game. Every year, all these teams, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, every year there's one game where their quarterback, it falls on their shoulders of, you need to go out there and win this game for us, whether it's a 2-minute offensive drill, whether it's making good decisions because they're putting 9 guys in the box, like whatever it comes down to. I feel like every year the teams that are the best, the quarterback has to win at least a game purely on his own.
I think that's college football in general, to be honest, too.
Right. But I mean, I guess the way I would say that is like Clifford's not going to do that. So we're not going to win 12 games. But CJ Stroud is going to go out and do that. I'm not sure if McCarthy can do that yet. And I think it just comes down to can Corum and Edwards rush for enough yards that they don't need McCarthy to throw it for 300 yards and win a game. If so, I think that they could go into, or they probably play Ohio State at home, right?
It's in Columbus.
It's in Columbus.
They can go into Columbus and run the ball 55 times. I think they can. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull out that win. I think they're still going to be 11-1. I don't see them losing to anybody else. I think they're too good to lose to anybody else. I mean, that's going to be a hell of a game in the last week of the season.
It always is. It really
usually is.
I mean,
usually is.
It's the game. I will say, I think Michigan has, like you said, the pieces to be that team, but we still have to see if they can, put it all together. Zach, what do you think?
Did you guys watch the Alabama-Tennessee game?
Of course.
Yes.
Did you notice the fact that those teams can score in the air in bunches all game long? And I think that's the difference with Michigan. I think they have the style and the pieces that if everything goes right, they're definitely good enough to win the Big Ten. I think they could beat Ohio State. I think the Ohio State's still the favorite. I think they're good enough. They have enough talent that they could beat the Georgias or the Clemsons or the Ohio States or the Alabamas. I think, Devin, you hit it on the head, though. As much as I'm the guy actually who I'm sort of a Clifford defender and say I think the quarterback position doesn't matter all that much generally, I think when it comes down to those playoff games and those truly elite, like top 4 or 5 teams, you have to have maybe not like elite quarterback play, but you have to have quarterbacks that, like that Alabama-Tennessee game where like they're just, both teams are just flying up and down the field with aerial
You have
attacks.
to have the threat.
You have to be able to match that every once in a while. There's going to be a game or two where you have to keep pace in the air. They're not going to run for 400 yards on Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee's defense I don't think is great, but point being, it's like they'd have to run the level they ran against us is what they'd have to do on the ground against like a Georgia or a Bama if they would want to compete with those teams because of the skill and athleticism that those teams have on offense. And it pains me to say that because I'm always the guy that says like focus on other positions before you start to blame the quarterback or point to the quarterback. But I think when you get into that truly elite category, look at Ohio State in basically the Urban Meyer and Ryan Day era. They pretty much, when they've lost, most seasons they're going undefeated, but when they lose in the playoffs, it's to an elite quarterback who's playing in the NFL right now. Alabama, when Alabama loses under Nick Saban, which hasn't been very often, it's to a really athletic, it's either an elite, truly elite quarterback, like a Trevor Lawrence or a Deshaun Watson, or even like somebody like a Manziel who could do it all in college and he could run, and you just kind of need that, I think, at the very top end. I mean, that's where, again, I get back to like Clifford's a great example. I'm the Clifford defender. If you built the right roster, like you can go 11-1 with Clifford, but you're not winning the national title. You're not, you maybe win the Big Ten title because you're playing somebody from the West if you get to the Big Ten. But I think that's Michigan's. I think that's the only thing that's holding them back because I think they have everything else. I think they got everything else, really.
Yeah. I will say, to hit on another point, I know to backtrack a little bit, Devin, you brought up about, Corum and Edwards. To all the Michigan fans who now subscribe to our podcast, I'm sorry that I called Edwards the backup because people were not happy about that. And I was more referring to him as not being the number one carry the payload kind of guy. Not that take away from his skill in any way, but I just wanted to comment on that because I saw that come up, I don't know, 30 or 40 times in the 250 comments I've responded to in the last, 48 hours.
We thought the Auburn fans were mad at you.
Yeah, man. Just don't call Edwards backup. So apparently Edwards was a 4 or 5-star recruit. So sorry, I take it back. He's not a backup. He's just second string, I guess. I don't know if that's better.
He's just 1B to Corum's 1A.
Yeah. 1A, 1B, exactly. So, For all those F1 fans, he's just the second driver. All right, welcome back from our quick commercial break. We're going to wrap up here. I'll go first. We're just going to wrap up the Michigan game. Big loss for us. We kind of found out maybe not who we are, but who we're definitely not. So we'll each go around the horn. We'll do, two big takeaways. I will say, on a positive note, our secondary still looked pretty good. I mean, they didn't really do much, but they also didn't cost us that game. So that's one good takeaway. And moving forward, I think maybe we should be recruiting a little bit bigger guys, but that's the bigger issue, I guess. I will say our running backs kind of need to find their feet. I know they're true freshmen, but we did not have any semblance of a real running game this weekend. So I know some of our commenters were saying that, you got to get Nick Singleton into space. I don't think it would have mattered because our offensive linemen weren't stealing the edge. Our schemes were not set up to, run toss plays, that sort of thing. So I do hope our running game can kind of find their feet again, especially against Minnesota, which we're going to cover next. But those are my two big takeaways is we need to get that running game more established again against good opponents. And I still think I was kind of doubtful on our secondary at the beginning of the year, but I think they've proven that they can lock down in man coverage, but man, we cannot tackle. I will say that. So those are my two takeaways. Devin, you want to go next?
My big takeaways. One, we have got to do a better job on first down because we are terrible on third down. And it all results in us being in third and long situations. I wish that stats were a little easier to gather as far as like the NFL does a really great job of third and short, third and manageable, third and long stats. And it's kind of hard to find that for most college football teams. So I don't have it right in front of me, but just watching the game, you can feel that we're in third and long all the time. So doing a better job on first down, I think is really important.
Real quick, just to touch on that too. I think part of the problem is I feel like we never get first downs on first and second down. Like it's always like chip plays.
Does feel like that
to get the third down to either punt or barely squeak out a first down or something. That's what it feels like. Just like reflect.
which is why I think our defense looked so not great on Saturday. Because even though I still think we have a really solid defense, I don't think we have an elite defense. I think we have a solid defense. But when they're on the field for 42 minutes, I mean, that's what's going to happen. And if the offense can't sustain any drives because we are on 3rd and 8 every time.
I mean, what was the halftime score?
16-14.
We gave up 14 points in 25 minutes of possession. That's pretty good, to be honest.
I know. I mean, I just, we've got to be better on first because our defense can't be on the field that long. Second big takeaway, is Sean Clifford injured? Because that kind of pissed me off, if I'm being completely honest. Because yeah, I know. Because it didn't seem like he was really injured. And obviously we will never know because Penn State and Franklin does not talk about injuries. If you wanted Drew Aller to play, just play him. And if Clifford was hurt, like let's talk about it. Like, is this a concern that we should have as Penn State fans? Is Clifford hurt again?
Well, I saw some posts that said that they may be projecting Aller to start.
Good. Let's start him. It's about time. What better place to get your first career college start than the Penn State whiteout at home in Beaver Stadium? That's the whole reason you
not against Ohio State.
Yeah, not against Ohio State or Michigan or Illinois, Zach. Let's start him. Let's do it.
All right. Call to action.
Yeah.
Make sure to subscribe and like if you want Aller to start.
Also subscribe and like if you don't want Aller to start.
All right.
Zach. Sorry, Zach.
No, it's okay. I mean, and I think this wasn't one of my two things, but I think it's just such a tough spot at this point. And well, getting back to your original comment about is Clifford hurt, like I put that all on Franklin. Like his, like would it shock me if Clifford wasn't hurt and Franklin just said he was because he wanted to play Aller and he didn't want to give bad vibes about Clifford? The way he's handled this whole thing, this doesn't give me good feelings.
And define hurt. I mean, that's what it comes down to me is is it, oh, I have a little bit of a shoulder stinger, I could 100% play, but we're down by 30? Or is it, no, I'm hurt, I can't play?
Well, and that's where, again, it's I'm reluctant to take that and assume that Clifford is a wuss. I'm more inclined to think Franklin just he did get a stinger or something and was just well, we're down 30, so we'll put Aller in because I wanted to put Aller in and trying to keep him happy. And then I'm going to go tell the media something else. I'm just kind of tired of his games and his I was a psychology major in college BS. But anyway, that wasn't one of my two things. One of them,
tell the truth meme.
One of them was this is when good coaches really earn their paycheck is these types of morale breaking losses. You've got a week to prepare. There's another game. There's no time to think about Michigan at this point, right? You self-assess maybe on Sunday and then
bury the tape.
Then it's move on, right? And as much as we can be critical and harsh, I think good coaches, and we got Coach Devin right here. I've always been a believer that your toughest and hardest and harshest coaching needs to be when after success, and oftentimes you need to be positive and coach people up and pump people up after failure, right? It's not every kid, but a lot of people. I think there needs to be a positive outlook. Look, we're going into the whiteout. It's a team that's kind of stumbling too. We got to jump all over them. We're better than we showed against Michigan. After the game, the instant reaction we talked about, usually when you look bad, you were bad, but that doesn't define who you are, right? You're usually you're not as bad as you look in your worst moments. So I think if the coaching staff is worth their salt, this is an opportunity to really come out and have a good game plan next week. You've got an opponent that you can capitalize on. So let's see it, right? Doesn't mean I'm optimistic about it, but it means it's something that could be going on right now in the building. And then the second thing is just something I've talked about throughout, which is I think against some of these better teams with our offense the last couple of years, we're just not good enough to sustain long drives against good teams. And I just feel like whether it's because of Clifford's arm strength or we don't think the offensive line can protect for long developing pass plays, we need to take some shots. I think we're not throwing the ball down the field. And you've got a run game that struggles against good opponents. You've got a quarterback that's regardless of whether you like him or think he's the worst, he's obviously got some limitations. So defenses can kind of just stack the box, take away the intermediate throws, and just jump all over routes. And I just think there needs to be some shots. And I don't mean the low percentage goal line fade to a 5-10 receiver, but we've got to be able to scheme ways to get Tinsley and Lambert Smith and Washington crossing routes, whatever it might be. Until the defense respects you, it's really hard to get anything going. So I'm looking to see next week, maybe the coaches look back and think, man, we were maybe a little too conservative. You've got to take some shots. And so that's something I'm looking for.
Yeah, I agree. We kind of don't have that deep threat, and getting those shots could definitely kind of propel us.
And maybe that's an Aller thing. If they get him in there, there's more, we've seen it over the years. Clifford is not, I think when he's at his strongest with a good game plan and good running game, he's pretty good in the intermediate passing game, but he obviously doesn't have the arm strength. And even what's weird to me is we all know he doesn't have the same arm strength as Aller, but he often overthrows guys on the long throws, which is weird because you think he would be he wouldn't be able to keep up with the receiver, but for whatever reason, there's a lot of overthrows over the years. So anyway, maybe that's something
as hard as he possibly can and get it there.
Yeah, maybe it's compensating, and but whatever it is, maybe that's the thing where if you're going to play Aller, let's use his arm, right? Let's take some shots. He's clearly got the arm strength to throw the ball down the field. So
yeah, I agree. Well, I think I'll wrap up. Let's bury the tape against Michigan, and we'll see you guys for the next one versus Minnesota.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast.
Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.